Okay, so we're going to start out, this is for Aide class, and I'm Unit 11, which is urinary. And here we're talking about urinary anatomy and physiology. Your major structures, of course, your kidneys. Now, your kidneys are responsible for homeostasis, for producing urine, of course, and for maintaining balance, homeostasis. The body demands balance, it demands homeostasis. So it has a big job trying to keep everything in balance. Of course, there's two kidneys, one on either side of your spine. They are in your upper abdomen towards the back of your spine there. Now there's nephrons, and you have over 1 million nephrons, and even if you take good care of yourself, by the time you're over 65, you start losing nephrons, and you can even end up having half as much as you did when you were younger. The ureters are the muscular tubes that go from the kidneys down to the bladder. Of course, the bladder is an open pouch. It's a hollow pouch that holds the urine, and it is made out of smooth muscle. And the bladder is called, if you have a bladder infection, it's cystitis. If you have a kidney infection, nephritis. If you just want to have the general term that covers all of it, urinary tract infection, UTI. Okay, average urine is about 250 milliliters. So it's about a cup, right? A little over a cup. It seems like more, doesn't it? But it's about that, they say. All right. It also, our kidneys help maintain, as when we're talking about homeostasis, is pH, a neutral pH, very slightly alkaline, which is 7.35 to 7.45. You should put out about 1,500 to 2,000 milliliters a day, which is about what you should take in. Therefore, balance. If you have dark, concentrated urine, that's a sign of perhaps dehydration, as well as a dry frowed tongue and poor skin turgor. All right. Let's talk about some symptoms. Retention, urinary retention. When you have urinary retention, that means after you urinate, some urine is still left in the bladder. Why would that happen? Well, in women it tends to happen because we have a prolapsed bladder. The bladder kind of falls over. Baby's birthday gravity. Everything just kind of comes down, and the bladder falls over. And by this, what I mean is, maybe I can draw this for you. The bladder should be kind of like a balloon, and it would just drain out. But in bladder retention, you might have something like this where the bladder just simply falls over, it slumps over. So if you're full of urine here, you urinate it out, you may have some bladder or some urine left in here that did not come out because the urine is prolapsed, and that would be called urinary retention. In a man, what we tend to see urinary retention in is because of benign prostate hypertrophy. This is when the prostate, which is located just up inside their body, becomes hardened, gristly, and what happens here, the prostate becomes enlarged and pinches off the urethra, which drains the urine. And so it can't get past the prostate. And so pressure builds up in the bladder until there's a lot of pressure in there. And then there's enough pressure on there where they can force it out. But after there's not so much pressure in there, when there's just about that much left in there, there's not enough force in there, not enough pressure in there for them to keep urinating out, and it stops. And they have urinary retention because of that. Okay, incontinence. Oh, back to urinary retention. This is significant because people who tend to have urinary retention also tend to have bladder spasms, more urinary tract infections, and that kind of thing, as you could probably imagine. Okay, incontinence. You know, incontinence is inability to control your urine. And there can be different types of urinary incontinence. There's stress incontinence, which I call the cross your legs when you sneeze incontinence. And that little detursor muscle is just weak, and it's the stress going down on it that makes it fail. Of course, not much urine comes out with that, and but that's why, and that's also why you do Kegels. There's urgency. Urgency is when you need to go to the bathroom right now. You cannot wait. It's an urgent situation. These are usually caused from bladder spasms. And there's frequency. And if you've ever had a UTI, you know what urgency and frequency is all about. Dysuria, difficulty with, urea, difficulty urinating. This can be painful urination, which of course you would have with a bladder infection. Oliguria and anuria is when you're not producing urine. That's generally, we're talking about dialysis issues. It's, when it gets to that point, it's dialysis time. And if you're not producing urine, then you have a lot of toxins in your blood. The urine that you would be peeing out is in your blood, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. All right, let's talk about infections, UTIs. And again, UTI is a generalized term. It's an infection somewhere in that urinary tract. Could be anywhere in there. Cystitis is specific to the bladder. All right. Let's talk now about, on page 68, the chronic bladder infections. What we're talking about here is colonization. And the reason people get colonized, what we mean by that, and I know you've seen this, you will have, let's say, Gladys, who in January has a UTI. They treat her with an antibiotic for 10 days. She gets better. In end of February, she shows back up, with that cloudy, foul-smelling urine. Treat her with antibiotic again, clears up, right? Over and over and over again. Folks, bacteria is a life form, and life will find a way. If that bacteria is colonized, if it is grown in deep into her bladder wall, you can't kill all of it. It's almost impossible without killing her. And her blood circulation is probably not real good. And so how much of that antibiotic's really getting there? And, that bacteria is smart. It'll find a way to become resistant to that antibiotic. And this is our problem today, is there hasn't been any new antibiotics for 40 years. And now all the bacteria are becoming resistant to the antibiotics we have. And this is causing a lot of problems. So you don't want to treat all the bladder infections all the time, especially if they are colonized with antibiotics, because you're going to be tempting super infection. You're going to be tempting, in especially C. diff. You don't want that. C. diff is caused by taking too many antibiotics, and you're killing all the good bacteria, because you need good bacteria in your gut, right? Activia, you need good bacteria. But taking antibiotics too much, and we take broad spectrum antibiotics. They are like shotguns. If you ever looked at a shotgun shell, it's full of all these tiny little like BBs, little pellet things, and you shoot it and it sprays out and it kills. So that's what a broad spectrum antibiotic is. It sprays out and it kills both the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. So you're lacking the good bacteria in your gut, and therefore this opportunistic bacteria can come up and take over, which is what C. diff is, Clostridium difficile. You know, I used to live somewhere where we live on the outside of town, and to the back of us, all these cornfields, wheat fields, all this stuff, right? Barns. And there was a greenhouse. The people went out of business. They left their greenhouse there. It got taken over by cats. I mean, a lot of cats. They were everywhere, and they started getting kind of scary looking, and it was not a good thing. So they tore down the greenhouse, and they got rid of the cats. And guess what we got then? Mice, field mice came in. Then guess what? Snakes. Big old, bull snakes. Yeah, to eat the mice, because there was nothing holding them back, because the ecosystem got out of balance. And that's what C. diff does. It doesn't have any predators, and the ecosystem gets out of balance, and that's how these things happen. So you don't want to treat everything all the time, because we'll end up with resistance, and we'll end up with our ecosystem off and having an opportunistic pathogen come up. Okay, that's why sometimes when you report, oh my gosh, Flossie's urine is cloudy and stinky again, and they don't treat it with antibiotic, and you feel like perhaps they don't care, that's not usually the case. Generally speaking, it's because perhaps they are colonized, and the best thing to do in that situation, unless they're having pain or other significant symptoms, is to just flood them with fluids and cranberry and such like that.